Well, good day, and welcome to the Kafner AES Virtual Field Days. My name is Tim Reinbott, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Missouri Agriculture Experiment Station. And today I'm going to talk to you all about crop yield as it is affected by soil health factors due to cover crop management. My co-author on this is Donna Brandt, Research Specialist with the Soil Health Assessment Center. One of the big issues about cover crop management is when do we actually terminate that cover crop? We often want to do it as early in the spring as possible, not to interfere with our corn or soybean planting. But as you can see from this graph over time in cover crop growth, that we miss out on a huge opportunity to take advantage of that larger cover crop. For example, the bottom line represents the growth of hairy vetch over time. And as you can see, 90% of its growth occurs in the first 2 weeks of May, about when it starts blooming. Whereas cereal rye is very consistent in its growth, but still, in early April, we still have very little biomass accumulation. And as you can see from this photo of cereal rye in the first day of April, it's not even as tall as the corn stubble from the year before. If you look closely, you can actually even see in the first of April the hairy vetch seedlings. Now, if you're going to use hairy vetch and terminate this early in the growing season, you're probably wasting your money because it's going to produce very little biomass, nor is it going to fix much nitrogen. If you wait a few more weeks, you can see that the cover crop is really starting to grow quickly. This is both the cereal rye and the hairy vetch, and compare that to what if we had terminated 2 weeks prior. And again, if we even wait a little bit longer, and this is Austrian winter pea, we see that we've gotten quite a bit of the legume growth. Now, for corn production, I realize that you're going to want to terminate at this point or even a few weeks before. But if we're going to plant soybeans, what if we wait till the cover crop is a little bit more mature and we can accumulate a lot of biomass? In both the corn and the soybean, we could actually plant green. And this is an example of us doing it this past spring. We were planting corn. We got delayed a few weeks on planting, so the cover crop's a little bit larger than what we wanted it to be. But as you can see, we used just a standard planter, nothing special, and planting directly into the cover crops. As you can see, it's actually standing up afterwards still. If you watch this again, some folks will say we should roll the cover crop down first, but we have found that it works best just to plant directly into it and not to even have any cultures on our planter, that we get the most effective seed placement. Speaking of seed placement, if we get off and look at this, you can see where the double disc opener went through the soil. If we dig down, there about 1.5 inches deep is our corn kernel. So we were able to get very good seed to soil contact, and we sprayed the cover crop the next day, and a week to 10 days later, you can see that the corn has emerged quite nicely. Now, we do realize that there are some drawbacks to this system. For example, if we have a dry spring that we had a few years ago, that we can have the cover crops slowing the growth of the corn down. They've taken up quite a bit of moisture. But keep in mind, though, when we do get rainfall, this cover on top of the soil will help keep more moisture in the soil and benefit the corn. Stands can also be an issue, and this could be mechanical, not having the planter set quite right, or it could be because often small mammals such as voles live in the cover crop, which can feed on the seeds or the young plants. So management does become a factor in utilizing cover crops. But what about soil health? Now, there's a lot of different ideas about soil health, and you hear this a lot, but it's really the integration of the chemical or the nutrients, the biological or the soil microbes, and the physical properties of that soil that all come together to benefit the growing crop. But we have these arrows going both ways because to show that the chemical and biological and physical properties are related. So if you improve the chemical properties, you'll improve the biological, which in effect will improve the physical. But it goes back the other way then. So improving physical will improve the biological, which will improve the nutrient turnover in our soil. So they are interrelated. But probably the most important, some effects of all of this could be summarized by the soil aggregate. Now, we're not talking about a clod. Instead, we're talking about the smaller particles of soil, that where we have a lot of our pores for aeration, for water retention, and for the structure of our soil, which is held together by the soil microbes itself, or the glue that they produce, and also the organic matter, as well as the cations in the soil. So this is very important for this to be stable. And here's an example of what we're talking about. If you have these dry aggregates here, and you soak those for 25 or 30 minutes, many of them will dissipate, much like we would have if we had a rainstorm. But those that are stable, those that are held together, that don't fall apart, those are our stable aggregates that give us our good soil properties and soil structure. So what did we do for our study? Well, we had 4 cover crop treatments. We had control, we had hairy vetch, we had cereal rye, and a combination of hairy vetch and cereal rye. The hairy vetch seeding rate was 20 pounds per acre, cereal rye was 60 pounds per acre, and the combination we reduced by 25% of each. We had 4 termination dates beginning in early April and every 2 weeks afterwards, but we planted our corn or soybeans green. That means that the cover crop had not been killed yet, it was green, and we killed it afterwards. As mentioned, we had a corn and soybean rotation, and at each time we terminated the cover crop, we took a whole suite of soil health measurements, as well as a month and 2 months later, because we wanted to see how these soil health measurements continued. This is a video of us planting soybeans directly to the cover crop. As you can see, the cover crops are quite a bit larger than what they were before for the corn. But again, there's no changes in the planter. We're planting directly into it to get that good seed to soil interaction. Now, what about yield? This is what we all want to know. This is corn yield as it reflects over the time that we terminated the cover crop from mid to early April till late May. This red line in the middle is our control at 170 bushels per acre. The top line is the hairy vetch, the corn yields following hairy vetch. And as you can see, regardless of the termination date, the corn yield was always higher following hairy vetch than the controls, especially later in the growing season when we had much more biomass produced by the hairy vetch, in turn probably more nitrogen. Now, corn yields following cereal rye were a little bit different. There wasn't much difference early when we didn't have a lot of biomass, but as we had more and more biomass from the cereal rye, corn yields decreased, except when we planted green. And this was a very surprising result, that we did not see any yield reduction there. Now, why? Possibly it could be some of the negative effects are no longer there. But also look at when we mix hairy vetch with our cereal rye, we do not get this big decrease in corn yield as we did cereal rye alone. Again, this could be because of the nitrogen that the cereal rye that the hairy vetch is fixing. Now, what about soil health and how does this relate to yield? This is Donna Branch. She's taken the soil cores at 3 inches at depth throughout the spring and into the summer. And we did the top 3 inches because this is where it's all happening. This is where we have the most soil microbial activity. This is also where we're having the interface between the environment and the soil. So that's where it's really, really important. And what we found, this is in July, this is in late July, this is the middle of reproduction for the corn when it needs the most water. what we found was that when we delayed termination, as we see in these yellow bars, that we had higher aggregate stability, even in July. So we're seeing an echo effect from the cover crop termination date all the way into late July. And this could improve our corn yields, more water holding capacity, more soil aeration, so a lot better improvement. Now, why did we get better aggregate stability? Well, what we found was that we improved as we delayed termination, our mycorrhizae in the soil and our fungi in general levels in the soil were improved, but also our eukaryotes. And these are like our springtails and our beneficial nematodes also were improved. So we got more soil microbes, resulted in better aggregate stability, and that helped improve our corn yield. So in conclusion, corn yield was not hindered by hairy vetch. In fact, we had a yield improvement in corn following hairy vetch, especially when termination was delayed till May. Now, cereal rye alone did decrease corn yield, especially when we had a lot of biomass, except when we planted corn into the green cereal rye, there was not a decrease in yield. Now, adding hairy vetch to cereal rye masked that negative effect of the cereal rye, probably because this hairy vetch was producing nitrogen, and this may be why this nitrogen tie-up may be why cereal rye does reduce corn yields. Now, delaying the termination of the cover crop resulted in more aggregate stability, which in turns was because of more fungi and mycorrhiza and other soil microbes. And this is probably why we saw this positive effect of delaying cover crop termination till mid to late May. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at my office phone number or my cell phone number, as you can see, or just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Now, if you do have a question, maybe that you want, a lot of people might also want to know, just go on our South Farm Facebook page and ask that question and I'll answer it there. Well, as always, we're so glad that you listened to our Kaffner Agriculture Experiment Station Virtual Field Day, and stay tuned for many, many more. Thank you.